Hi, I'm Beth Guyton. Thanks for joining me for this second session brought to you by Readiness Associates, made especially for the American Institute of Healthcare Compliance. We're going to review the Steady and Raise Resiliency Model in this session. Let's get started. And just as a reminder, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, so please try to find me there, Beth Guyton with Interactive Quality. So for this session, we only have two simple learning objectives. I'm going to introduce the Steady and Raise model, and each letter in Steady and each letter in Raise stands for a different behavior. So I just want you to try to connect with one behavior from each Steady and Raise, and then be able to recall that and describe that behavior. You may remember from our first session that resiliency is the ability to bounce back from adversity. And when we're resilient, we're able to interact with our environment and its stressors in an optimistic and adaptive way with a focus on purpose, human connection, and personal growth. So keeping that in mind as we move through the presentation will be very helpful. You may also recall that there's three different areas in which we can build resiliency resources. Of course, the personal level and the Steady and Raise model, you'll see addresses that, but also on the team and social level. And that really is very dependent on a leader's knowledge and ability to do so, and then the organization's culture and structures that support the leader in doing that. And so there's also an organizational level of building resources. And you may recall from our previous presentation, we talked about several different factors that are organizational level factors that can either drive engagement or burnout. So things like, workloads and demands, processes and efficiencies, being able to bring the value and values to play in the daily culture of the organization, and in doing that, bringing meaning and purpose to the work of the front line, clearly defining roles and kind of leeway so that you're allowing as much autonomy and control and flexibility in the individual's work day or in carrying out their work as you possibly can. So keep those things in mind on an organizational level. We're going to focus on Steady and Raise during this presentation, but realize putting Steady and Raise into place in an organization is one way to create a resource hitting on all these levels. On the organizational level, through the culture, equipping the leaders to be able to drive the team and social resources, and then also really teaching personal resources to all staff and kind of creating a standard of resiliency resources through the model. You may also recall there's 4 broad categories of personal resiliency resources, those being positivity, meaning and purpose, human connection, and self-empowerment. So I won't go into great detail on all of these, but just keep in mind positivity is really about having that learning growth mindset, being open to new experiences, being curious, and really practicing gratitude. Meaning and purpose involves being very clear on what's important to you, and being intentional, aligning your choices, your behaviors, your goals with that meaning and purpose so that you can do things that are worthwhile in your mind and really meaningful to both you and to others and even to your organization. Human connection is critical for our well-being and our resiliency. We all need that social support. And to a large extent, we're able to connect better with others when we are stronger and more positive as an individual. And so how do we empower ourselves through self-empowerment, build up those skills, but also have good interaction skills on the communication front, conflict resolution, being able to express empathy towards others. And then self-empowerment has a lot to do with continuing to grow personally through self-awareness, self-knowledge, emotional intelligence, self-management, and that's everything from, how we interact with others, how we manage our emotions, but even just eating right, getting the exercise we need, getting a good night's sleep. So all those things really help us to be more resilient. So now we're going to dive into the Steady and Raise model. Steady is the portion of the model that is taught to everyone in the organization. Each letter stands for something. S is for seeking stories. T is for turning thoughts around. E is for empathizing, A is for avoiding judgment, D is for not taking or don't take anything personally, and Y is for you, because what you do can really matter. So as we dive into each of these, I'll give you a little bit of detail so you can kind of understand the nature of them and maybe glean at least one or two practical things you can do under each letter. So seeking stories is really about our ability to interact with others, even other people that we may find incredibly frustrating or annoying, in a way that becomes positive for us, especially, and for them too, but especially for us. So what we want to do, especially when we're interacting with someone, and you can imagine this in a, it can be in any line of work, but where it's service heavy, especially caring for others, you may run across patients or family members, or even teammates that are incredibly, annoying. They may, especially patients and family members, they may be presenting or interacting with you at their absolute worst point in their life. And so their behavior may not be stellar. And so how do we look beyond that behavior to see, the unique human being that is there, and appreciate them, and their goodness as well as their flaws, because we've all got flaws. So we want to be curious, and wondering is a concrete strategy that we can use. So it goes something like this. Let's say I am interacting with someone who their behavior is really just kind of offensive. If I can step back and just know, they're a human being just like me, I wonder what's beyond the behavior. So I can ask questions like, I wonder how they'll spend their holidays this year. I wonder what's been the toughest for them through this time, this pandemic. I wonder what their greatest talent is. I wonder what their experiences were when they were a teenager, 15 or 16. I wonder who their best friend is. And so I could go on with these wondering questions. I just want to give you enough of them that you can begin to understand how we begin to make this human connection with others that we may see initially as a source of stress. And I would encourage you to try that wondering exercise next time you find yourself in that situation, and see if you can kind of switch gears and get to a place where the behavior isn't the only thing that you see. Now, as we look at turning around thoughts, we are always more powerful and less stressed out when we're operating in our circle of control and our circle of influence. And it's fundamental to understand that our thinking is fully in our control. We can recognize when our thoughts are going to a negative place, and we can move them into a more positive place. So turning thoughts around is about operating, in that circle of control, especially in relationship to your thoughts, and to actively, consciously, notice when you have a negative thought, and to be able to reframe that in a more positive light, really one that decreases the amount of stress that you're experiencing. And remember, there's always two sides to every coin. So the coin doesn't change, but if we're looking at one side, the positive, or the other side, the negative, it's still the same situation. So how can we begin to make that choice to turn those thoughts around and see the opportunity embedded in our struggles? And then we should always assume good intentions of others. It's so easy, especially when we're not feeling at our best, to assume the negative intentions of others, but that really doesn't get us anywhere positive. So how can we, again, turn specifically those thoughts around, where we're almost kind of like assigning intention to someone else, where we can try to see the other side of it. What could be a good intention buried in that behavior or that activity that we're experiencing, that exchange that we're experiencing? And then practicing mindfulness. And mindfulness is simply being totally present in the moment, and aware of what's transpiring. And a piece of what's transpiring is our thinking. So are we mindful of when our thoughts do tend to head to a negative place, and can we redirect our attention back to a more positive perspective? So that's how mindfulness plays into it. And we'll talk a bit more about mindfulness in the next session too, because it's really a powerful strategy on many levels to be able to build resiliency and well-being. I wanted to share this graphic with you. Um, just so you can understand, when we work inside our circle of control, and really when we think about the universe, the smallest circle, the smallest amount of things are really within our control. So it's logical that lots of times it's easy for us to get outside of our circle of control because there's more things we could potentially fixate on or focus on that's out of our control. But when we're strongest when we're inside of our circle of control. So we're thinking about things that we can change, that we have the power to change, the ability to change. And then the things that we can influence are also really important and help us to feel stronger. And we will have more potential and more positivity when we focus on what we can influence rather than what's out of our control. We're going to feel the greatest amount of fear and anxiety when we focus on things out of our control. And again, I spoke a little bit to mindfulness on the last slide, but that's a big piece of mindfulness is we set an intention. Our minds will drift. We're going to naturally fall to the behavior that's easiest and that we've done in the past. And if that's being negative or assuming bad intentions of someone else or focusing our attention on things we can't control, so we fall into kind of victim thinking, then that happens. But if we're mindful, we set our intention. When the drift away happens, we recognize it, and then we can bring our thinking back into our circle of control and our circle of influence and really be able to reframe things. And that is how we empower ourselves and we gain strength, and we can diminish that sense of stress and anxiety that we may be feeling. So very important to understand that. I think this visual helps us do that. So now when we talk about empathize, there's several elements to empathizing. And the first is just, if we want to empathize with someone else, we need to be able to see the world as they do. And that's a lot easier said than done. It takes a little bit of practice, but not to frame things in our experience, our perspective, how we would evaluate a situation or judge it or what we would do, but see the world as others do. And to be able to accept each person as they are without judgment. And we need to realize that everyone has a different tolerance, everyone has a different reference point. So if someone is experiencing a certain emotion, but we can't say, well, that's ridiculous, that doesn't matter. We need to be able to accept each person as they are and where they are. So we need to see it from their perspective and really accept it as what's their reality and how it is to them. We need to be able to understand their feelings, and then we need to be able to communicate this understanding. And so empathizing, again, sounds so simple, but it really requires us to get out of our perspective and almost take on the perspective of the other person as best we can, and then to be able to effectively communicate that we can see how you see it. I'm not judging how you see it, and I think I understand how you're feeling. And it's also important to realize that empathy is different from sympathy. When we empathize with someone, we are able to give them support and connect with them. Sympathy is different because we are not striving to see things from their perspective and to understand them. It's almost like we feel uncomfortable and bad and sorry for them, and we're trying more to fix it. So if you find yourself judging or trying to fix or trying to minimize something by telling a story about you, you're probably leaning towards sympathy rather than empathy. So remember these 4 steps to be able to see it from their perspective, accept without judgment, strive to understand their feelings, and then be able to communicate that understanding you have of their feelings. That would be empathizing. And these are just some examples of empathetic communication, because that piece about communicating your understanding, I think, can be really tricky. So I'll quickly go through these. One is naming. So when you're naming what you believe that they are experiencing, you want to do this in a very calm way. Watch your tone, your facial expressions, but you calmly identify the emotion you understand the other person is experiencing. So it could sound something like this. It sounds like you're feeling angry, and see what they say. Understanding is acknowledging what you can observe and reflecting back what you heard. So an example of that might be, talking with you helps me see what you're going through. So you're not judging in any way, but you're just understanding that and acknowledging it. Respecting has to do with affirming the other person. And it can be something as simple as, wow, I really admire your commitment to this situation or to resolving this problem. Supporting is to offer the support in a way that they can receive. And, you know, um, that's another thing to be a little bit sensitive to when you're trying to empathize with others, is the type of support we may want may not be the type of support that's comfortable to them. And so just be aware and make sure that you're looking at things from their perspective, and not your own perspective, and trying to meet your own needs. So it could sound something like, I'm here to listen, if that would help. Um, so, so that's just kind of some ideas around that. And then the last way to communicate and empathize could be exploring. So you might ask some more focused questions to learn more about the situation. And it could be as simple as something like, could you tell me more about? And then you just name the thing. Or you might want to say something like, could you help me understand what led up to, and you explain the situation. And that way you're gaining more information. And again, you're not judging. So just some ideas for empathetic communication. And now we're going to move to avoiding a judgment. I will say, this is probably something we all struggle with, whether we want to or not, and it may be more subtle for some of us than others. So as we go through life, we're making judgments all the time about all kinds of things. We have to, because we have to make decisions about where we want to spend our time, who we want to hang out with, where we want to invest energy, even what major we're going to partake in college and invest in, what type of career or job we're going to move into. So in a way, assessments, judgments are part of life. But what we want to do is avoid judging others. And from a resiliency standpoint, once we start judging others, we really become our own worst enemy in regard to building our resiliency. So when we judge others, typically it is out of fear. And when we do so, we just looked at the, kind of the circle of control, circle of influence, and things outside of our control. We are giving up all of our power to that judgment. And so we jump right out of our circle of control, which is a place where we're going to have the greatest strength and feel the least stress and anxiety. And so we put ourselves in that position. We enhance our fear, and we're really focusing on everything that we can't have an impact on, versus maybe getting curious about that person, seeking their story, or turning our thoughts around and being mindful, recognizing, wait, I'm judging. Is that really fair? Let me stop doing that. And so when we judge someone, they become the judgment. So for example, I might be working with a teammate and I might judge, oh my gosh, she's lazy, or she's just not very bright. She's so slow. Well, then that person becomes more of an object than a human being that I can see as unique and engaging and a source really of support for me. It becomes this thing, this annoyance. And it's very disrespectful to that person, but it also cuts me off from the human connection, resource, my self-empowerment resource. Because again, I'm just focusing on them and their shortcomings. I'm missing the opportunity to build my personal resources. I'm missing the opportunity to see how I could grow, because all my focus is on them and my perception of their shortcomings. And so I miss the human connection. I miss the self-efficacy. It's negative, so I miss the positivity. And I don't think anybody values or can find meaning and purpose in being critical of others. So you can see how it just destroys all the resources that we have. So this graphic, the idea comes from the Arbinger Institute, A Heart of Peace. But when we can see other people, when we avoid judgment and we can see other people as human beings equally worthy as we are, then we will have a heart of peace and we will have less stress and less anxiety. When we judge other people, we begin to see them as the judgments we pass on them more as objects, and we really are seeing them as less worthy than we are. And that will enhance our fear and our anxiety. So just know that judging does not serve anyone, and it really is detrimental to building our resiliency resources. So we want to avoid judgment. We don't want to take anything personally. So Q-TIP is just a little acronym that stands for quit taking it personally and wonder. So we talked about wondering under the seeking stories, and it really applies here too. So there's all kinds of things happening during the course of our workday that we could find offensive or stressful, but I would say 99% of the time, they really don't have anything to do with us. They have more to do with the other person, or maybe the situation, or the processes or the demands of the day. So how can we, turn our thoughts around and take the perspective that, hey, this really isn't about me. So we can quit taking it personally and we can wonder. And there's so much value in making these two terms, wondering and Q-tipping, a norm in your organization's culture, so that we can say, hey, I'm Q-tipping like crazy today. And then we can connect with one another and understand and offer support. We're all, employing the same strategies. Again, we always want to assume good intentions of others. And of course, remember, most of the time, things are not about us. It's really about something else. And when there is a real conflict, if there is something that you need to address, challenge yourself to address the issue and build the relationship. So you'll do so in a way where it's not about you. You're not taking this personally, but you are trying with an optimistic, solutions-oriented approach to address the issue and to build the relationship with the other person. And that's so powerful, and that will enhance your self-efficacy and your human connection and bring things to a more positive place. And finally, in the steady model, we get to the why, which is you. And each of us really can make a huge impact on how we can't take all the stressors away that we're going to encounter in our day, but we can really impact how we're going to respond to those stressors, if we're going to respond, and how we're going to react if we're going to react. So that interaction piece, we really can have a great deal of control over. So build your resiliency resources. Focus on how you can become more positive, how you can do things with intention that really connect back to what's most important to you, and that the time and effort you put in really is worthwhile. It's meaningful. It has a greater purpose. Strive for that human connection. There's so much joy that we can derive in really engaging with others, getting to know them, and respect and appreciate them as another human being, just worthy of our respect and worthy of dignity. And we can extend that to them. And in doing so, it really energizes us and fills our cup up. And then self-empowerment. So constantly be looking for the ways that you can get into your circle of control and your circle of influence. You can build your skills and your competency and continue to set yourself up for success through self-awareness, self-knowledge, and self-management. Now let's shift and go to raise, which is the leader's role in the steady and raise model. And the R stands for relationship, the A is for acknowledge, the I is for investigate, S is for support, and E is for evolve. So let's think about relationship. Above all, leadership really is a relationship, and each leader should consciously develop a caring relationship with each staff member. Fostering trust through behavioral integrity, they need to know that they can count on you. that you are dependable. What you say you are going to do, you're going to pull through. They need to know that you hold the same standards for yourself and everyone else. So there's no favoritism. And if you are true to your values, and if you make a decision because of a certain value on Monday, that those same values hold true Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And so they can begin to really rely on what you stand for. And you have that behavioral integrity through that consistency of your behavior. Role modeling is so important. And I actually have another slide right after this one on that. So I'm going to speak more to that. But I think role modeling the standards of behavior, for sure, role modeling the behaviors that are going to promote resiliency that we just talked about in the STEADY model is critical. And you should also demonstrate your appreciation. So every individual always wants to feel valued and appreciated. And that's been one of the most fascinating and universal things I've noticed as I've done the work I've done over the past decades, is it doesn't matter if I'm meeting with, the highest level person, the president or the CEO of an organization, or someone that is just a frontline staff worker. Every single one of us has that desire to be valued and appreciated. So to the extent a leader can demonstrate how much they appreciate others, team members' contributions, it really builds that relationship and is so important. And then consider how you can connect your values and the organization's values back to the daily work. And you can do that in many ways. And even on the days where you're asking your team to go above and beyond, if you can connect, what's required of them in that unique moment to values that really can hold meaning and purpose for you and for your team, that also can really build the relationship. So let's talk a minute about role modeling. Followers look to leaders to set the standards. They're really looking for behavioral integrity, looking to see that you're matching, your verbiage, your communication with your behaviors. And so role modeling is one of the best ways to demonstrate your expectations and to set standards and really to gain the trust and the commitment of your followers. So positivity, we talked about how important that is to resiliency. So you want to make sure and check, am I living that out? Am I doing the best I can with staying positive even when things get negative? And if there's opportunity for you to enhance that resiliency resource for yourself personally, it's definitely worth investing in. Then the reframing struggles as opportunities. This is a piece of those turning thoughts around. And lots of times followers look to leaders to kind of make sense of difficult times and what's happening. So it's so important as a leader for you to be able to reframe struggles as opportunities and really help them make sense out of the struggle and the learning and the opportunity that is embedded in that challenge. And it's a great opportunity to connect that to meaning and purpose through values and being able to articulate, what's worthwhile for the different stakeholders in that situation. And that brings me to considering and respecting all stakeholders. It's so important to acknowledge those and to, in doing that, you really can value different people, show respect. You can demonstrate kind of that wondering in a way where we're going to see other people just like us as human beings, worthy of respect and dignity, and really extend that through your role modeling, demonstrate how you're doing that. Embracing change. Change is hard. Nobody really likes change, but as a leader, you need to role model meeting change with optimism and the thought, hey, we've got this, we can do this, because they're looking to the leader to get a signal. Accountability, it's so important that we all kind of own our piece of the puzzle and our behavior, and that's critical for leaders to role model. Valuing diversity, and that's ethnic and cultural diversity, but it's also diversity of thought, diversity of how we approach our work, and how can you role model that and help demonstrate how bringing diversity into the team really accelerates the team's performance and enhances it? And how can we, by respecting one another's differences, be there to support one another even more? Role model emotional intelligence. Your self-awareness and your self-management, how you communicate, how you handle emotions. We all have them, we all feel them, and none of us are perfect. So understanding, even when you misstep, how do you speak to that and demonstrate learning from that and growth from that? So all those things are really important, and role modeling is just a precious opportunity to lead and to build relationships. So now if we move into the A in the RAISE model, it's about acknowledging, the reality of how hard it may be for staff in this time on a specific day with a specific patient or situation. So this involves really listening actively. Sometimes we're so busy and it's just about slowing down, getting back to that present moment. That's where mindfulness can assist in so many ways. So how can you be fully present to actively listen to what's going on, not bringing any preconceived ideas about, what the situation is, but just really listening. Again, avoiding judgment, because once we judge, we really narrow our focus. We simplify things into a label that we've given them, and we just are missing so much of what's going on. So avoiding judgment to really understand what's happening. And although you're acknowledging and you're understanding, if there is negativity, you don't want to join in. This is where you need to pull on all those role modeling things we just spoke about to be able to reframe things, to try to seek solutions. Don't gloss over something that needs to be addressed at all, but clearly communicate what you can do, what you will do, but don't join in the negativity. And then you always want to acknowledge, hey, you're not alone, and let that frontline staff or follower know how they're not alone, how you will be supporting them, and what things can be done to try to resolve what you're acknowledging here. Now, I is for investigate. And so, what we want to do is look beyond the obvious, kind of like a good investigator or Sherlock Holmes or, a sleuth. So we want to understand what's not obvious, and that's going to require us to actively explore and engage with our staff to understand what's going on. So exploring causes of stress. So not just understanding, oh boy, they're so stressed out today. It could be something like we're short-staffed. Again, why is that happening? We'll look into it. Try to find the cause and the root cause, and see if you can bring about a different reaction, even though it may not all be on your shoulders as the leader, to identify problems, inefficiencies in workflows, staffing concerns, gaps in processes, or even relationship issues among your team, and to be able to try to actively get the support that's needed to resolve those problems is a leader's role, and it's so important to do that. And then don't ever forget, especially, well, all the time, but especially during this time, there's a lot going on in everyone's home life or personal life that may be causing stressors. So take the time to investigate if there's something more that can be done to alleviate those types of stresses. And then I would also say it's good to, as we talk about it, exploring, to proactively go out. And I think it's critical to spend a little bit of every day, and ideally a little time in the beginning of the day and a little time towards the end of the day, kind of harvesting what's going on, getting a sense of how are people doing and what can you do to support them. So that investigating is just routine. And I think it's great to have some questions in your back pocket that will stimulate good conversation. And remember, with resiliency, we always want to try to focus on the present. So these are just some ideas of questions you could ask. As you're visiting with staff, what would you say is your biggest stressor right now? What is the most important thing for me to know or to understand? what is the one thing that I can do for you right now? So think through and come up with a handful of questions that are comfortable for you as a leader to ask, and that you think will give you good information without giving you 3 weeks worth of a to-do list, right? But that you can really show genuine concern and gather enough information to alleviate some stressors that your staff may be feeling. And then support is the S part in the RAISE model. So with support, there's limits to what you can do. Just like the diagram earlier, there are going to be a lot of things outside of your control, even though you may be a leader, but fix what you can fix. And you always want to interact with your staff in a way that you are role modeling, demonstrating, leading with positivity to a solutions-based way of thinking and approaching things. And, we want as leaders to do what we need to do to support our staff, but we also want to foster kind of self-management of the team so that they begin to learn the skills and definitely have the ability. And again, that gets back to how much flexibility, autonomy, and control do they have over their work to solve some of their own problems. And that may be the support that you give them, is to have better definition of like, hey, you know what, you guys could take action in this way. This would be great. What do y'all think about that? Let's put a process in place, or redefine, what your scope of decision making or accessing resources might be during this time. So think about those kinds of things and how you can just role model that positive solutions-oriented thinking. Definitely model effective communication, and a big piece of that is that conflict resolution. Always remember, the goal is to address the issue and build the relationship, and challenge yourself to do both in the same time. Coach in the moment. It's always more effective to address things in the moment. We don't, if someone's at a breaking point, we don't want to, coach in a negative way for sure. We want to coach in a supportive way. But how can we help them move through that moment in a way that feels good to them, builds their self-efficacy, empowers them, and really gives them something to draw on the next time they're in that tough situation? Think about that 90-10 sandwich, which just means 90% of what you're saying really should be positive. It should be praising, appreciating, thanking, and then the 10% should be the suggestion for the improvement or the needed change, or the coaching that may be more like, well, this is what you can do next time. So don't make it the other way around. You definitely want to go heavy on the positive and very light on what might be perceived as negative. Always set clear expectations. It will decrease stress because and unknowns always create more stress. So it decreases stress when we have a clear sense of our roles, our responsibilities, our limitations, and what our leeway is, what autonomy and control we do have. You always want to set clear expectations, and then foster social support. So, that can be done in everything you do. How do you give consideration to others? How do you treat others with dignity and respect? How are you fostering that among your teams? Are there things that can be done even in the midst of COVID to build that social network? I know we're not probably wanting to have potlucks and all sit down and share and eat together, but are there ways that are safe that we can begin to share maybe concerns and how we can support one another, get to know one another better? And there are definitely little things you can do, whether it's in your huddles, during break time, just to foster that kind of connection among your teams. And always know that, it's your job as a leader to advocate for your team. So we talked about investigating, acknowledging what's a struggle, investigating, really actively trying to explore what can be done to help them. And not everything is going to be within your control to fix. So how can you advocate for your teams and see if there are other resources that you can bring in to the mix from a higher level to be able to support your teams? And then the last piece of the RAISE puzzle is to evolve. And really, this is such a tough time. We're all being asked to make so many changes so rapidly. And a leader's role is really to help staff navigate those changes. Now, I understand nobody is operating probably from a place of the greatest strength right now with the stressors we all feel. But again, how can you help staff navigate change in a way that's positive? Think about explaining the why in a way that's relevant and meaningful to them. Of course, always actively listen to their concerns. Don't go to the negative place with them, as we talked about before, but definitely listening to those concerns and asking for their input, and trying to be very mindful, very present in the moment to see opportunities where they can be more engaged. More of what they see as the solution can really be a piece of the solution, and to bring about the positive change that is needed as we move forward. And don't let negativity foster. Again, you want to respectfully listen, but if things are getting really negative, you need to nip that in the bud and move forward. So role modeling all the resiliency behaviors that we talked about, especially being able to be positive, to turn thoughts around and reframe things, to treat others as human beings worthy of respect and dignity, is so critical as we move through very difficult changes in the workplace today. And I love this quote. It's actually from the lady who created the Study and Raise model, Audrey Cortez. And she always says, the only place we grow is outside of our comfort zone. So realize that evolving is very uncomfortable, and that you as a leader will be challenged sometimes with this, but gain comfort in knowing that as you're moving outside of your comfort zone, you are growing and you are evolving, and you are building those self-empowering skills, your self-efficacy, and then in turn you can help your staff do the same. So again, thank you so much for spending this time with me. If you have any questions or want to discuss any of the things presented here, I'd love to connect with you. You can reach me through my email, beth@interactivequality.net. And again, this was brought to you by Readiness Associates. If you have any questions about how they can support you with emergency preparedness and really moving through the pandemic, ensuring that you're meeting all the requirements and compliance involved with the COVID-19 pandemic, please reach out to Michael Boardman at michael.boardman@readinessassociates.com. Thanks so much, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.